Hi everyone, it's Emma from Misfit Gardening, and today we're canning tomatoes. These are Romas. Put them in my apron. Grab that one too. Looking for ones that are mostly red for this sauce. This is a variety called Black Creme. You can see we've got some splitting on here, and this is caused by infrequent watering. That's what's caused all these. It's still fine to eat. We just had some problems with our sprinklers. So in this particular tomato, we've got some blossom end rot that's happening. Everything further up will be fine. I don't really want to waste it, but that is something that's happening, and it's typically caused by a excess of nitrogen or not enough calcium, and that's because it can't regulate the water and grow properly. So it's something to look out for. I have been diligently saving the tomatoes that I've been harvesting over the last few days so I could then make a batch of sauce. And in here I've got lots of different varieties. You can see I've got some at slightly different ripeness, because I may have knocked a couple off the vine. Okay. So I've got quite a few different varieties in here. I have some like this, which are an Italian Genovese variety. These are Black Icicle. They've done pretty well and they're pretty tasty. Got plenty of Romas in here. I also have a couple of Amish paste tomatoes. I like these because these are pretty big. And I've got some Black Creme tomatoes in here, and I think I've got a purple Cherokee, yeah, here as well. So lots of different varieties of tomatoes. I really like tomato sauce with different types of tomatoes in there, but if you're only growing one variety, then by all means you can follow the same steps. Paste variety of tomatoes do work better for making tomato paste, and that's because they actually contain less water in there. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be also going to cut off some of the bad bits like this where it's pretty soft in there, and then we're going to heat them up and then put them through a food mill to remove the skins and the seeds, and then we are going to be baking it on a tray to remove some of the water. So right now I'm just going to give these all a good rinse, and I'm just using like a 4-ounce size of jar. This has got a different type of lid. I normally use the ones with the 2-piece lids, but I'm going to be trying this particular jar because I was sent it to trial by SKS Bottles and Packaging. So I'm going to give that a go along with my usual jars and see which I like better. Okay. It's got a good wash. Ooh, some of them are kind of looking a bit squiffy, so I might just pop those to one side. So what I'm doing is just kind of dividing these into ones where I've got bits that I need to cut out, any kind of bruising or anything like that. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about safe canning of tomatoes, okay? The USDA actually says that you should be putting some sort of acidic agent with your tomatoes. So that can be lemon juice, citric acid, vinegar, something like that. Tomatoes are kind of one of those borderline vegetables, okay? Sometimes you can get varieties that are more acidic than others. Other times it really depends on what's happened to that tomato. So for example, One of these tomatoes that I've got that's a bit overripe might have less acid in it than a perfectly picked tomato. So depending on what's happened to it, also how ripe it is, can really impact the amount of acid that you have in there. So to be perfectly safe, make sure you put some acid in there, follow the directions of your recipe. If you were completely new to canning something and you want a tried and true recipe, there is some great resources online. Do my tea. One of the best resources online, and one that I go to time and time again, especially if I'm trying to preserve something new, is the National Centre for Home Food Preservation, which I think is run by the University of Georgia. I'm going to link to it down below, and that is a great resource. It's free as well, it's all online. And they tell you various methods of how to preserve vegetables. It's not just like home canning, but also things like freezing and drying and all that good stuff. So it's a great free resource. Be sure to go ahead and check it out, because I would much rather that you try to can something using a tried and true method and be safe than try to follow along with something that you've never done before, because you know, when it comes to canning, it's always better to be safe rather than sorry. Just going to cut out that really soft piece and just make sure everything's okay underneath. Now all this recipe calls for is just to place the tomatoes into a large pot, something that can hold at least 8 quarts, 8 to 10. So I've got my stainless steel pan here. I was looking. Oops, wrong part. Ooh, some seeds there. You know what? Whilst we're doing this, let's do some seed saving. Waste not, want not. Just going to scrape these seeds in there. It's a good sized tomato too, I don't really want to lose that. Okay, just going to keep those there for the minute, so if I've got any more I can put those in there while I'm going through this. Got another soft spot there. Oops, use the knife the right way around it. Put the meat on that. Very good. Okay. I also check underneath the tomato just to make sure there's no mould in these, especially these fluted varieties. You often can get you know, breaks and, you know, mould kind of forming in those. Okay, and all that can go into the compost heap. Now into this I'm going to sprinkle 1 teaspoon of salt. Now I should point out I'm using kosher salt. You don't have to use kosher salt, you can use pickling salt. Just don't use iodized salt, because it can do funny things to your batch when you are canning. So I'm just sprinkling salt in here. Okay. Now we're going to get this over to the stove and we're going to let this kind of cook down a bit. So I've just got the tomatoes in this stock pot. There is nothing else added other than the salt, and what's going to happen is these are on a medium-high heat. They're going to start breaking down and we're going to be simmering them for about 15 minutes, and then after that we're going to put them into a food mill. And I'm using the finest screen that's in here, because what we want to do is we want to try and cut out as much of the seeds as we've got on there. We want to really make sure that we've got a nice clean sauce. do that, we need to just kind of clear all the seeds and the skins out, and this is a perfect way to do that. Get in there. There we go. Okay. We're good. We're good. Dog, however, is not. Just kind of keep things moving in here because things do get stuck to the bottom of the pan. Smells good though. So we're coming up to 8 minutes left. So we've just been a little over 5 minutes with this, and already you can see the amount of juice that has been made from these tomatoes. So this initial higher heat is to kind of break up these tomatoes a bit more, especially these slightly greener ones, so they'll start breaking down and forming this juice. The next step, and this is definitely why I've got the extractor fan on, is that this is going to be left uncovered for 2¼ to 3 hours until this juice is basically reduced. If this, yeah, that makes sense. If this juice liquid has been reduced, and we basically want this to reduce till there's about 8 cups worth of liquid in here. That is a lot more juice. I'm going to reduce the heat. I'm kind of low. And we're going to let that just do its thing now for the next 2¼ hours. So I'm going to set the timer. I'm going to come back periodically and check and give it a stir. And hopefully we'll see that reduce down. This has reduced down quite a bit. Now it's time to do the food milling. I actually let this cool down as well a bit, so it was going to be easier and less hot splashing too. Let's just do it little by little. And I've actually got another sieve screen underneath to catch out any of the seeds. There we go. Starting to get something down at the bottom there. So we're just going to keep going through, milling and running it through the sieve into the bowl until we get to the next step. And the next step is going to be putting it into a roasting pan and popping it in the oven so it reduces down even more. So we'll be right back at that bit. So the sauce is reduced down quite a bit. It's very hot, and you can see where it was kind of catching along the sides. But what we're going to do now is jar it up, and then we have to water bath can it for 35 minutes. To meet food safety, we need to add some acidity. I'm going to put 1 1/4 teaspoons in each jar, so I'm just going to start with 1. This is where it gets kind of fun. Still a little runny actually, it's runnier than what I would like it to be. And I could just put it in the oven for a bit longer. And always make sure that you leave enough space for expansion. So I'm leaving a little bit of a gap there, and pop the lid on. Just make sure there's no food debris on there. Leave that under it. Just to be sure. Fingertip tight. This one, lid on, and pop the band on. Fingertip tight again. This one. So we need to put these into the water bath canner, and there's only 3. If I had some other things to can at the same time, I would. But what I'm going to do, because if I just put these in, when I lift them up, they're all going to knock around and fall over, and there's going to be a risk of breaking. So to combat that, what we're going to do is we're going to fill some additional jars just with water that we can then open and discard later, and that's going to help keep everything steady, but it's also going to help keep the temperature a bit better too. This is hot. Definitely boiling. I need to lower this in, and the water needs to cover the jars by a good couple of inches. So you need to be kind of gentle lowering it in. We don't want to smack it in there, because then you risk damaging the jars. Now this is already boiling again, so I need to set the timer for 35 minutes, pop the lid on, and that's it. It's going to do its thing now. So here are all the jars that are done, and luckily we didn't have any breakages or anything, so the important part now is to just leave them here. Don't touch them, move them or bump them if you can, because they're still kind of fragile. You've got gas that's still coming out of these, and that pinging noise that you hear, that's the lids contracting down as the vacuum's produced. So we want to just leave them alone and let them cool completely, and then these can go downstairs into the pantry. So it's relatively straightforward to can tomatoes. It's just always best to follow a tried and true recipe, and if you're a beginner, you know, there's some great resources, especially that Centre for Home Preservation. online, and again I'll put that link to the bottom.